"You're wearing the necklace again," Charles said, glancing at my collarbone like it offended him. "Didn't I tell you that thing's worth at least 3 dinners?" I looked at him from across the table. The light above us was too bright, the tablecloth too white, the restaurant too new and soulless. His wife Claire was busy unfolding her napkin with manicured fingers, pretending she didn't hear. "Yes," I answered, placing my purse gently on my lap. "You did tell me." He leaned forward, lowering his voice but not his cruelty. "Well, if you want to eat here, maybe consider selling it." I smiled, quietly. Then I closed my purse and set it on the empty chair beside me. That was the moment I understood. I hadn't come to dinner. I'd come to say goodbye. The waiter came over just then, full of the usual practiced warmth. "Will you be having the sea bass tonight, ma'am? It's very popular." "I won't be staying," I said, and stood. Claire's face flushed instantly. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Martha. Charles was only joking." "No," I said calmly. "He wasn't." For a moment, no one moved. The clinking of glasses and murmured laughter from other tables went on, detached from the quiet violence unfolding at ours. I reached for my coat. "Thank you for the invitation," I said, not unkindly. "I hope you both enjoy the evening." Charles stood up too, a little too fast, knocking his knee against the table. "Mother, sit down. You're making a scene." I looked him straight in the eyes. My son, 46 years old, a man who once cried because he dropped his ice cream cone in the parking lot, a man whose school books I'd stayed up all night to help organize when his father died. "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm just leaving." And I did. Outside, the wind hit harder than I expected. I walked slowly, steadying myself with each step, refusing to let the trembling in my hands reach my face. The valet asked if I needed a cab. I shook my head. I needed air. Time. Silence. I walked down the street, the heels of my shoes too thin for the cracked pavement, the pearls around my neck cold against my skin. That necklace had been a wedding gift from my mother. I hadn't worn it in years. Until tonight. A gift from one woman who understood what it meant to survive, to another who was still learning. I reached the corner where the florist used to be, now a frozen yogurt place, and leaned against the bench under the awning. It smelled like burnt sugar and teenage perfume. For a long moment I just sat, listening to the noise of the world around me. Cars. Laughter. Someone's dog barking across the street. I could still feel Charles's voice ringing in my ears. "Sell your jewelry if you want to eat here." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said it, like I was a burden he couldn't quite throw off. Like all the years of scraped knees, midnight fevers, endless loans, and quiet forgiveness were suddenly irrelevant. And maybe they were. I looked at the small purse beside me. Brown leather. Clean, but old. Inside were 3 things. A tube of lipstick I hadn't used in weeks, a checkbook with my name in worn cursive, and a tiny envelope with an opal ring inside. I'd meant to give it to Claire, as a peace offering, as a gesture. I almost laughed. Instead, I got up and walked the long way home. The sky was already folding into night. Wilmington Avenue buzzed behind me with Friday traffic. My neighborhood would be quiet. Small brick houses, porch lights, the low hum of televisions through windows. I unlocked the door to my house and stepped inside. Warmth. Familiar things. My kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon from the morning toast. A cracked tile near the stove, the old green clock ticking too loudly. I took off my coat, hung it neatly, and sat at the table. My knees ached, but I didn't mind. Pain, I'd learned, was just another kind of reminder. On the table was a small notebook, my budgeting ledger. I opened it. Page after page of transactions. $400 here, $200 there. Private school tuition, mortgage help. The new sofa they desperately needed last year. I flipped to the back. A note to myself written months ago in faded ink. Remember who you are. Don't explain. Don't beg. I closed the notebook and stood. Tonight I would not cry. Not again. Let them eat sea bass. I had soup in the freezer and dignity in my chest, and both would be warm. The house was silent, but not empty. It held sounds you could only hear when you'd lived somewhere long enough. The click of the radiator settling in the walls, the soft creak of the hallway floorboard outside the bedroom, the refrigerator's low hum that reminded me of my husband's sleeping breath. I boiled water and poured it over a chamomile bag, letting the steam rise into my face like a benediction. I didn't light the kitchen lamp, just the over-the-sink bulb. I wasn't ready for brightness yet. I took my mug to the living room and sat in the wide, sagging armchair where I used to read bedtime stories to Charles. The cushions still had a dip where he used to sit curled against my side years before he learned to roll his eyes. There were photos on the wall. Our family, in frames that hadn't been dusted in too long. Charles with his gap-toothed grin on his first day of school. Charles at 13, holding a football bigger than his arm. Charles and Claire on their wedding day. My dress had been lilac. I remembered because Claire had wrinkled her nose and said it was a bit grandmotherly. And then the last photo, me, holding baby Simon, their son, my only grandchild. He'd be 12 now. I hadn't seen him in months. I sipped my tea, letting it burn the back of my throat a little. My eyes traced the ceiling cracks that ran like quiet rivers through the plaster. It wasn't sadness I felt. Not anymore. It was something colder. Something that came after sadness, when the morning was over, but the bitterness had settled in like dust in the corners. What had I been hoping for at that dinner? Not thanks. I'd long stopped expecting that. Not affection. That too had faded with time. Maybe just basic kindness. A table where I wasn't treated like a relic someone felt obligated to display and then hide again. A meal where my presence wasn't a transaction. I put down the mug and rose slowly. My knees groaned. My back tightened. My body had learned to adapt to quiet disappointment. But my mind, it was sharpening. In the hallway closet, behind an old umbrella and a box of tangled Christmas lights, sat the brown accordion folder I hadn't touched in 2 years. I pulled it out and brought it to the kitchen table. It smelled faintly of mildew and old paper. The elastic was stretched and brittle and snapped as I opened it. Inside, check stubs, bank statements, receipts, some printed emails, handwritten notes. I began sorting. One by one, I laid them out in a line like cards in a game I already knew I'd lose. Tuition payments. Emergency dental work. A new air conditioner when theirs broke. Christmas bonuses when Charles had been between jobs. A check for $10,000, marked Business Bridge. He had promised to pay it back within 6 months. That was 8 years ago. Another for $4,500, Claire's car. Just a small loan, Mom. I need something safe to drive Simon to school. They'd asked so easily, and I had said yes so easily. That's what no one tells you about aging. It's not the forgetting that's hard. It's the remembering. All of it. The way you were asked, the tone of voice, the silences after you said yes. I found the letter from the insurance company confirming the policy I'd cashed in 5 years ago. The money had gone to help them renovate their kitchen. Claire needs the space. You know how much she loves to cook. As far as I knew, Claire hadn't cooked in years. They had 3 food delivery apps on their phones. I'd seen them. I found a crumpled Post-it, stuck between receipts, in my own handwriting. Don't give more than you're prepared to lose. I must have written it during one of my rare moments of clarity. I smiled. Too little. Too late. I stacked the papers back into the folder, slower now, more deliberate. Each one was a reminder. Each one a piece of the truth. It wasn't just the dinner. It was the years that had led to that moment. The first time Charles said, "Can we just keep this between us?" The first time Claire looked through me like I wasn't even in the room. The way Simon, once sweet and curious, now barely said more than 2 words to me. I had allowed all of it, with every dollar, every gesture, every silence. I had made myself smaller and smaller until even my presence at dinner felt like a luxury they could revoke. I stood and stretched. My legs trembled a bit. I held the edge of the table for balance, then carried the folder to the secretary desk in the corner and locked it inside. Tomorrow I would visit the bank, but tonight I would sleep. Not the restless half-sleep I'd grown used to, full of worries and rationalizations. No. Tonight I would sleep with a heart that, while bruised, had finally started to beat on its own terms. And for the first time in years, I wouldn't dream about what I owed. I'd dream about what I still had left. I didn't sleep deeply, but I slept fully. When I woke, the light coming through the curtains was gray and clean, the kind of morning light that asks nothing of you. I sat up slowly, my joints stiff but bearable. There was no rush. That was the gift of my age. Time was no longer a tyrant. I made coffee instead of tea. I wanted the bitterness. At 9 sharp, I was dressed and ready. Slacks, blouse, coat, neat, modest. The opal ring was still in my purse. I didn't take it out. The bank was only 3 blocks away. I didn't drive. I wanted to walk. The cold air cleared the last bits of sleep from my bones, and as I moved down the sidewalk, past the bakery with its cinnamon haze and the pharmacy window full of vitamin displays, I felt something like steadiness return. Inside the bank, it smelled of carpet and air conditioning. The line was short. I waited behind a man with too much cologne and a woman holding a baby that stared at me with frank, drooling interest. When my turn came, I asked to speak to someone about my personal accounts. A young man named Terrence brought me into a small glass-walled office and smiled with too many teeth. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Fletcher?" Fletcher. That was my husband's name. I still used it, even though George had been gone for 14 years. I liked how it sounded. Solid. Kind. "I'd like to review all outgoing payments and automatic transfers," I said, setting my folder on the desk. Terrence blinked. "Certainly. Do you have something specific in mind?" "Yes," I said, unfolding the first page. "I want to know exactly where my money is going. And then I want to stop some of it, maybe all of it." He nodded, suddenly less casual. He typed on his keyboard, his fingers long and pale. "You do have several recurring transactions set up. Most of them are scheduled monthly. Mortgage support, education funds, a car lease. List them for me," I said. "Everyone." He printed a sheet and passed it over. 14 automatic payments, totaling just over $6,300 per month. I stared at the paper. So did Terrence. "Is something wrong, Mrs. Fletcher?" I folded my hands on the desk. They looked older today, but they didn't shake. "No," I said. "Nothing's wrong. I'm just finished." Terrence tilted his head, trying to stay polite. I'm not sure I understand. I want every automatic payment suspended immediately, I said. Until further notice. I'll come in monthly if I have to approve any transfers. I can help you set that up, he said. But I'm required to inform you. Some of these are in the names of family members. You may be asked about it. I expect that, I said, and then added, it's overdue. He hesitated. We'll need your signature on a couple forms, and I recommend printing out the full transaction history so you can keep a physical record. Do that, I said. While he printed, I looked out the window behind him. The street was quiet. A few leaves blew by in gusts of wind. I wondered if Charles was awake yet, if he and Claire were talking about me over brunch, or if I had already been forgotten, yesterday's discomfort swept away by dessert and espresso. Terrence handed me the papers. I signed them cleanly, each line deliberate. I'd also like to remove Charles Fletcher as the secondary contact on all my accounts, I said. Effective immediately. Terrence blinked. You're sure? Very. He nodded, then typed. And if I may ask, do you have a new secondary contact you'd like to add? I thought of Simon, then dismissed it. He was just a boy, a sweet, distracted boy whose affections could still be molded by the adults around him. No one for now, I said. Just me. He nodded again and slid the updated forms into a folder with my name on the tab. Everything's in order. You'll receive confirmation by mail. Thank you, I said, standing. As I walked out, I felt strangely light. Not happy, no. This wasn't joy. But it was something firmer, clarity. There was no more pretending, no more trying to stay useful to people who only called when their check engine light blinked or their tuition deadline loomed. I didn't owe anyone explanations. I didn't owe anyone anything. On the way home, I passed the small law office 2 blocks from the post office. The sign outside was familiar. Harlan and Koses, Estate Planning and Trusts. I stopped. Then I went inside. The receptionist looked up, surprised. Do you take walk-ins? I asked. She checked the calendar. We have someone available in 20 minutes. Will that do? It will, I said, and sat down. Outside, the wind pushed harder against the windows, but I was steady. My coat was buttoned, my purse was closed, and for the first time in years, I was walking into a room without asking permission to be there. The lawyer was younger than I expected, 40, maybe less, but his handshake was firm, and his office smelled of real wood and quiet money. His name was Marcus Harlan. No wedding ring, crisp navy suit, a photo of a dog, not a family, on his desk. I liked him immediately. What can I help you with today, Mrs. Fletcher? He asked, folding his hands together in a way that told me he'd done this conversation 100 times, but he'd make space for mine to feel new. I want to adjust my will, I said, and I want to set up a trust. He didn't blink. All right, we can absolutely help with that. Is this a revision of an existing document or a complete restructuring? Complete, I said. Nothing from the old one should remain. I want a clean start. He nodded and opened a folder. May I ask, before we begin, do you have any specific goals? For the trust? For the will? I looked out the window for a moment before answering. The sun had broken through the clouds, just enough to cast a pale gold stripe across his bookshelf. Yes, I said. I want to make sure that the people who stood beside me when they didn't need to are the ones who benefit when they no longer can. That made him pause, just briefly, but he nodded again. Understood. We talked for nearly an hour. I told him about Charles, about Claire, about Simon. I was fair. I wasn't here to punish. I wasn't seeking revenge. I just wanted things to reflect reality. Charles had been named my sole heir after George passed. At the time, it made sense. I wanted to protect my son. But sons become men, and men make choices. And Charles had made his. Marcus asked careful questions. Did I want to disinherit them completely? Was there anyone else I wished to include? I have a granddaughter, I said, surprising myself. From my brother's side. Her name is Joanna. She visits once a month, sends real letters. Handwritten. I don't think she even knows how much that means. Marcus nodded. We can set up a percentage allocation or name her as a primary beneficiary. She gets the house, I said. And the car. Everything else goes into a trust. For her, or for a cause of my choosing later. And your son? Marcus asked. Not accusing, just clarifying. I considered. A letter, I said. He'll get a letter. Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Once we'd established the framework, he pulled out forms. You'll need to sign these today. I'll notarize them, and then we'll begin drafting the final documents. I signed. My hand shook slightly on the first line, but not on the second, or the third. By the time we were done, I had a folder of my own, sleek, embossed, organized. It felt more solid than any family photo. Do you need assistance informing your family of these changes? Marcus asked as he walked me to the door. No, I said. Let life inform them. It has a louder voice than I ever did. Outside, the wind had calmed. I walked home the long way, passing the bookstore, the diner, the park. The benches were empty, the trees beginning to shift into their brittle autumn coats. At home, I made soup. Lentils and carrot. Simple. Warm. I ate it slowly, at the table, with a cloth napkin folded just so. No TV, no phone. Afterward, I pulled the opal ring from my purse and held it up to the kitchen light. It was lovely. Not extravagant, but honest. A cabochon cut, smooth and glowing from within. George had given it to me on our 20th anniversary. I had planned to give it to Claire. Not because she deserved it, but because I wanted to believe I still fit into their lives in some way. That gesture had been my offering, proof I still wanted in. Now I slipped the ring back into its envelope and placed it in the top drawer of my secretary desk, not as a keepsake, as a reminder. That evening, the phone rang. It was Charles. I let it ring until the machine picked up. Mom, it's me. Just wondering if everything's okay. Claire said you left kind of suddenly yesterday. She thinks maybe it was her tone, but I told her it couldn't be that. Anyway, give me a call. He hung up. No apology. No question that acknowledged anything deeper than inconvenience. I picked up the phone and erased the message. Then I opened a new notepad. At the top, I wrote, "What I want." It was a short list. It began with peace and ended with freedom from expectation. I was 72 years old and just beginning. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Old habits. George used to say that real clarity came before breakfast. I never believed him at the time. I do now. I made a pot of tea and sat by the window, watching the sky lighten behind the chimney stacks. It would be a quiet day, and that was exactly what I needed. There was still one last task I hadn't touched. A box at the back of the closet. Not papers, not receipts, no numbers at all. Just memory. I slid it out from beneath a folded quilt. The cardboard had softened at the corners, the tape browned with age. Inside were pieces of my life I hadn't seen in decades. George's old watch, still not ticking. A faded apron, with flour in the pocket. Birthday cards with awkward child handwriting. To the best mom ever. From a boy who no longer called me that. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue, were the earrings. Tiny sapphires set in silver. They had been a wedding gift from George's mother. I hadn't worn them in over 20 years. I wasn't sure I ever would again, but I wasn't here to cry. I was here to account. I brought the box into the kitchen and laid each item on the table like evidence. These were the things I'd never tried to sell, not even when the roof leaked or the washing machine broke or Charles lost his job for the third time and needed just a little help to get back on his feet. These were the things I kept because they mattered, and now I had to decide, what would I do with them? I wasn't in a hurry. I made toast, ate it slowly, then called the jeweler. McAndrews and Sons, the man answered. Yes, hello. My name is Martha Fletcher. I have some family pieces I'd like evaluated, not for sale, just for clarity. Of course, Mrs. Fletcher. We can schedule a private consultation. When would work for you? Today, I said. Late morning. He gave me a time, and I wrote it down on the corner of yesterday's newspaper. Then I packed the earrings, the necklace, and the ring, carefully, separately, as if I were sending each to a different destiny. I took the bus. It was the same route I'd taken for years when George and I couldn't afford a second car. I used to carry groceries and hand-knitted sweaters on this route. Now, I sat with a soft-sided jewelry case in my lap and the kind of calm that only comes from no longer needing anyone's permission. The shop was quiet, all velvet displays and soft lighting. The man behind the counter was younger than I'd expected, maybe my Charles's age. He greeted me with a practiced warmth, then led me to a small room with a lamp and a scale. Let's take a look, he said. I handed him each piece one at a time, and he examined them with the reverence of someone who knew value when he saw it. He paused at the ring. Lovely setting, he said. The opal's clean. This is older, probably handmade. Sentimental? I nodded. A gift, long ago. He nodded too, as if that was answer enough. When he finished, he handed me a printed sheet with figures and descriptions. I didn't need to read them. I already knew what I wanted. I won't be selling, I said. Of course, he said. But it's wise to know what you have. Yes, I said. That's exactly it. I tucked the paper into my purse. As I stood to leave, he added quietly, most people come here when they're desperate. I'm not desperate, I said. I'm awake. Back home, I put the items away. Not hidden, not forgotten, just placed. That afternoon, I sat at the dining table with my checkbook. I went through every line item I'd circled from the bank printout, every payment I'd suspended, and I wrote beside each one, in pen, what it had been for. Claire's insurance, Simon's school lunches, Charles's second car, spa membership, weekend cabin rental. Next to those, I wrote a second column, repayment unlikely, not as bitterness, just truth. I paused over the cabin. I remembered the call. Mom, this place is perfect for family bonding. You should come too. I'd paid the deposit. But when the trip happened, I wasn't invited. No room, Charles had said sheepishly. Claire's sister is coming, and Simon's bringing a friend. I wrote next to it, not forgotten, not forgiven, not mourned, just marked. The phone rang, not the landline, my mobile. Joanna. Hi, Aunt Martha, her voice chirped. I was just checking in. How are you? I swallowed the lump in my throat before it could rise. I'm good, I said. Busy, actually. That's great. Listen, I was wondering. Next weekend I'll be in town for a conference. Any chance I could drop by? Of course. I said without hesitation. Bring your appetite. I'll cook something decent for once. She laughed. Deal. After we hung up, I sat for a while in the quiet, letting it settle. No one had asked me how I was in weeks. Not really. Not since last fall, when I'd gone in for that scan, and Claire had texted, "Let us know if it's serious." It hadn't been, but even if it had, I knew they wouldn't have shown up. The doorbell rang, not expected. I opened the door, and there he was. Charles, windswept, red-faced, no coat. "Mom," he said, stepping forward. "We need to talk." I stepped back, but not to let him in, just enough to let the air pass between us. "I think you're right," I said. "We do." And then I closed the door. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. The conversation could wait, but my clarity could not. The silence after the door clicked shut was loud. I stood there for a moment, hand still on the knob, breathing in slowly. Through the frosted glass, I could see Charles's shape hesitate, then retreat. No knocking, no shouting. He left like someone who hadn't expected the door to close, like someone who was used to it staying open, no matter what came through it. I turned back into the house and walked slowly toward the living room. There was a photo on the mantel I hadn't really looked at in years. Me and George, arms linked, standing in front of our first car, a battered blue station wagon with peeling paint and no air conditioning. We were both young in that picture. I was wearing a yellow dress I'd sewn myself. George had one arm slung around my shoulders and the other pointing to the hood of the car, like it was a prize we'd won. We were both smiling, not for the camera, but for each other. That was 1969. The summer before Charles was born. The beginning. I sat on the couch and let the memories come, uninvited. I'd spent so many years pushing them aside, too busy, too tired, too needed. But now there was no reason not to let them in. George had died quietly, the way he lived. 1 minute drinking coffee, the next minute slumped forward in his chair. I'd known something was wrong the instant the mug hit the floor. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. Charles had been 28. He flew in, stayed 2 nights, made a lot of promises. "I'll check in on you every week, Mom." That lasted a month. I didn't blame him then. People grieve in strange ways, and I was strong, or so everyone said. I handled the funeral. I sold George's tools. I even ran the hardware store on my own for another year before closing it. Then I started again. That part no one really remembers. How I opened the alterations shop on Main Street with nothing but 2 sewing machines and a loan I wasn't supposed to get at my age. But I did. And I worked. And I paid every cent back. When Charles got laid off, I sent money. When Claire wanted to go back to school, I offered help. When Simon was born, I drove over with casseroles and soft blankets. I said yes so many times I forgot what no sounded like. And maybe that's where I went wrong. Saying yes when I should have asked why. Giving when I should have waited. But I wasn't made for waiting. I was made for action. That was the thing about surviving. You do it by moving forward. Always forward. I looked down at my hands. Thinner now. Veined and freckled. These hands had made a life out of other people's scraps. Hemmed dresses, scrubbed floors, signed checks, carried, too much maybe. I stood and went to the bedroom. In the top drawer of George's dresser, still his, though he hadn't touched it in years, was a wooden cigar box. Inside, the deed to the house. A stack of old tax returns. A letter George had written me once and never mailed. He'd left it inside the drawer with a note on the envelope. For when you need it most. I opened it carefully. The paper had yellowed, and his handwriting was cramped and slightly slanted. Martha, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I don't know what happened, but I know this. You'll carry on. You always do. But don't let that become a burden. You have a right to rest, too. A right to be heard. A right to say no. You gave your life to us, and if I didn't say it enough while I was alive, I'll say it now. Thank you. And don't let them make you invisible. You're not. You never were. George. I folded the letter and placed it back in the box. Then I closed the drawer and sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap. I had been waiting, I realized, not for Charles to come around, not for Claire to soften, not even for Simon to remember the way I used to hold his hand when he was scared of the dark. No, I'd been waiting for permission to stop, and now I had it. Not from them, from George, from myself. I went to the hall closet and took out a suitcase. The good one. I packed slowly, deliberately. A few changes of clothes, a pair of soft shoes, the photograph from the mantel. I didn't know where I was going just yet, but I knew I'd be going on my own terms. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum to someone I no longer wanted to be. The phone rang twice that afternoon. I didn't answer. I spent the evening writing letters, not long ones. Just enough. To Simon. I hope one day you understand the cost of silence. I loved you when you were small, and I love you still. But love isn't enough to stay where you're not wanted. To Claire. You don't owe me kindness, but you owe me honesty. One day, I hope you give it to someone, even if it isn't me. To Charles. I didn't write anything. Not yet. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because he'd have to learn, for once, to sit with silence. The same silence I'd lived in for years. The same silence he'd left me in after every request, every, "Thanks, Mom," with no question of how I was doing, what I needed, what I feared. Let him wonder. I tucked the letters into envelopes and set them on the counter. In the morning, I'd make plans. Tonight, I would sleep. Not from exhaustion, but from resolve. The next morning, I didn't make tea. Instead, I opened the windows. The autumn air rushed in like a guest who'd been waiting outside too long. It swept through the living room, rustled the curtains, lifted the edges of papers on the kitchen table. The house shivered, and so did I. Change always starts with a chill. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and stood in the middle of the room. The suitcase was still packed by the door, quiet and patient. My letters lay on the counter, unopened, unstamped. I wasn't in a hurry, not yet. At 9:40, the phone rang. I knew who it would be. Charles. I let it ring once, twice. On the third, I picked up. "Hello," I said, my voice calm, even. "Mom." His voice was rushed, tense, that tone he got when something in his world didn't go the way he expected. "You didn't answer yesterday." "I know." He hesitated. "Can we talk?" "We are," he sighed. "No, I mean in person. Can I come over?" "I'd rather talk now," I said, while the air's still clear. Silence. Then, "Okay." I sat down. He didn't. I could picture him pacing somewhere. His office, maybe, or his car. He always had trouble being still when he wasn't in control. "What's going on?" he asked finally. "Claire said you left dinner because of something I said, but, Mom, I was joking." "You weren't," I said simply. "Well, I didn't mean anything by it." "But you did." He exhaled hard through his nose. "Okay, fine. Maybe I was frustrated. You always bring up the past, the sacrifices, the… Look, I just wanted a nice night. And I wanted respect, I said. We both left hungry. He didn't respond. I let the pause grow long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I added, Charles, I've canceled the automatic payments. That got him. What? Everyone, as of this week. I spoke to the bank. I spoke to my lawyer. He started talking over me, fast, panicked. Wait, what? You can't just… Mom, that covers Simon's school, Claire's health insurance, the second mortgage. That's thousands of dollars. I know, I said. I signed the checks. You didn't even warn me. I wasn't required to. He made a sound, half laugh, half scoff. You're punishing us. This is because of one bad night? No, I said. This is because of 15 years. He went quiet. I could almost hear his thoughts, gears turning, weighing what he could say to turn this around. But I wasn't a problem to be solved. Not anymore. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said, more softly now. I'm doing this because I don't want to be complicit anymore. In what? In my own erasure. That shut him up again. Charles, I said, do you know when you last asked me how I was? Without needing anything? Without prefacing it with, hey, Mom, quick thing? Do you remember? He didn't answer. I do, I said. It was the year Simon was born. You came over just to check on me after George died. You brought soup. You let me talk. That was a long time ago. Yes, I said. It was. Mom, come on. You're overreacting. We're family. Families. Don't get to treat each other like banks with doormats, I interrupted. Don't call that family. I've been under a lot of stress, he said, shifting tactics. The business. Simon's grades. Claire's been… I closed my eyes. Charles, I don't need excuses. I don't even need apologies. I need boundaries. He laughed bitterly. You sound like a therapist. I sound like someone who's finally listening to herself. More silence. Then quietly, what do you want from me? And there it was. The first honest question. I let the moment sit before answering. I want you to understand, I said. Not just hear me. Not just nod and wait until I go quiet. I want you to understand that I gave you my life. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself. And that ends now. He didn't say anything. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Finally, he said, so what? You're cutting us off? I'm choosing myself, I said. If that feels like being cut off, maybe it says something about the way we've been connected. I don't know what to say. I know. Another pause. Then, grudgingly, can I come by tomorrow, just to talk? You can, I said, but not to convince me, not to reverse anything. Okay, he said. I waited, and for the first time in a long time, he added quietly, how are you, Mom? I didn't expect the question to land the way it did. I felt it in my chest, like an echo of something I used to be. I'm still figuring that out, I said honestly. Then I added, but today, I'm better than yesterday. He didn't reply right away. Then, okay. And then he hung up. I set the phone down gently. Outside, the wind had slowed. The curtains fluttered less. The air was still clear. And so was I. The knock came just after noon. Not loud, not urgent. Just a few measured taps on the front door. I was ready. I'd been expecting him since breakfast. I had even laid out 2 cups on the kitchen counter, though I hadn't filled the kettle. I wasn't sure I wanted to offer tea, not yet. I opened the door. Charles stood there in his usual blazer and jeans, the kind of outfit that made him look casual, competent, in control. But today, his collar was wrinkled, and his hair had flattened on one side like he'd been lying down too long. He looked tired, not from work, from something deeper. "Hi," he said. I stepped aside. "Come in." He didn't carry anything. No briefcase, no peace offering. Not even Simon, whose presence might have softened the edges. He stepped inside, glanced around the living room like it had changed. It hadn't. The same photos. The same clock ticking too loud. The same rug he used to lie on with his plastic dinosaurs. "Smells like cinnamon," he said. "I baked," I replied. He sat down on the edge of the couch, awkward, like a guest unsure if he was overstaying his welcome. I sat across from him in George's old armchair. The distance between us wasn't far, but it felt like a hallway with too many closed doors. "Thanks for letting me come," he said. "I told you, you could." He nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. A long pause followed. I didn't rush to fill it. Eventually, he said, "Claire's furious." I raised an eyebrow. "She thinks you're punishing us." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Charles sighed. "You really cut everything?" "Yes." "And the trust?" "Claire's friend works in estate law. She heard something through the firm." "I updated everything," I said. "Legally, permanently." "Mom," his voice softened, not pleading, but uncertain. "Why now? Why so suddenly?" "It wasn't sudden," I said. "It was slow, painfully slow, like dripping water carving stone. You just didn't see it happening." He rubbed his hands together. "You think I've taken advantage of you. I know you have." He flinched. That was the first visible crack. "You're my mother," he said. "I thought we had, I don't know, an understanding. We did. I gave. You took. That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's not." He leaned back, exhaling hard. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. Claire's job is unstable. Simon's grades are slipping. The mortgage—" "You've been saying that for 10 years, I interrupted. "But somehow, there's always money for new phones, for weekend getaways, for wine clubs and ski trips." "That's Claire." "No," I said sharply. "That's you too. You made the choices. You stood beside her while she looked through me like I was a staff member who overstayed her shift." He didn't argue. "You're right," he said after a while. "You're right about a lot of it. I guess I didn't think you'd ever—" "Say no?" I finished. He looked up. Met my eyes. "Yeah." I leaned forward, hands folded. "Do you remember the last time you hugged me without needing something?" His mouth opened, closed. "I do," I said. "Simon was too. You dropped him off for the weekend. You kissed me on the cheek and thanked me. That was the last time you looked at me with something close to warmth." He swallowed hard. "Mom, I'm not telling you this to hurt you," I said. "I'm telling you this because I spent years thinking if I gave enough, I'd be remembered. I'd be valued. But you can't buy love, Charles. I thought maybe I could earn it by being useful. But all it did was teach you that I came with conditions you didn't have to meet." He ran a hand through his hair. His fingers shook slightly. "I didn't realize," he whispered. "You didn't want to." He looked older now. Not from time. From awareness. "I never meant to." He trailed off. I waited. "I just didn't think you'd ever pull away." "I didn't pull away," I said quietly. "You stopped holding on." Silence again. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said. "But you will have to live with how things are now. That's not punishment. That's reality." He nodded slowly. "Do I get another chance?" I tilted my head. What would you do with it? He didn't answer, and that was answer enough. I stood. Do you want pie? I asked. It's still warm. He looked startled. Yes. Please. I brought 2 slices, served on mismatched plates. We sat, not speaking, just eating. For once, the silence felt neutral. Not heavy, not cold. Just true. When he left an hour later, he paused at the door. I'll call, he said. Only if you want to know how I am, I replied. He nodded once. I will. I didn't know if I believed him, but for now that was enough. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Cream-colored, heavy. The kind of paper people choose when they want to appear important. My name was written in neat cursive. No return address. I didn't need one. Inside was an invitation, not handwritten, professionally printed, with little gold flourishes around the corners. You are cordially invited to a celebratory dinner honoring Simon Fletcher's Scholarship Award. The date was this Saturday. Time: 6:12 p.m. Venue: the Willowbend Country Club. RSVP requested. I stared at it for a long time. There was no note, no personal message, just my name. As if someone on Claire's side had decided to include me at the last minute and printed one extra. Not a word from Charles, not even a phone call after his visit last week. And Simon? I hadn't seen him since he was 11. Still, I traced the letters of his name with my thumb. He'd always been a soft boy, quiet, careful, with large dark eyes like his grandfather. The kind who built castles out of couch cushions and gave you his dessert if you looked sad. The last time he hugged me, his arms barely reached around my waist. I set the invitation on the table and went to the window. Outside, the leaves had begun to fall, red, yellow, brittle, the kind that crumbled under your shoes like the past under pressure. I didn't move for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called Joanna. Hi, she answered, cheerful as ever. Are you free this Saturday? I asked. A pause. I think so. Why? I have an event, I said, and I'd like you to come with me. She didn't ask what kind, didn't hesitate. Of course. What should I wear? I smiled. Something that makes you feel solid. Saturday came cold and fast. I wore the dark green dress I hadn't touched in years. The one George had always said brought out the sharpness in my eyes. I pinned my hair up, slipped on the pearl earrings, wore no perfume. Joanna arrived at 5. She wore navy and a quiet lipstick. When she saw me, she blinked. Aunt Martha, she said softly. You look like a woman who's about to close a chapter. Not close, I said. Just underline. She offered her arm, and we drove together. The Willowbend Country Club was as tastelessly elegant as I remembered. High glass doors, too much brass. A valet who tried to take the keys to a car we weren't driving. Inside, the dining room was warm and gold-lit, with round tables covered in white linen and silver cutlery arranged like surgical tools. I spotted them at once. Charles, Claire, Simon. Simon stood taller now, thinner. The same dark eyes, though. He wore a suit that didn't quite fit and shoes that probably weren't his. He was smiling, laughing at something Claire whispered to him. Then he saw me, and the smile faltered. Not gone, but softened, like he didn't know how to place it. I approached, Joanna just behind me. Claire was the first to recover. She gave a tight-lipped smile. Martha, I didn't think you'd come. I was invited, I said calmly. Of course. Her eyes flicked to Joanna. And this is? My guest. Simon stepped forward, unsure. Grandma. It hit me like a slap. I hadn't heard that word from him in 5 years. "Simon," I said, offering my hand. He took it. His grip was unsure, but warm. "I'm glad you came," he said, and for a moment, I believed him. We were shown to our seats, not at the main table, of course. Near the back, a polite distance. That was fine. Joanna leaned over and whispered, "You want to leave?" "No," I said. "I want to see." The speeches began shortly after the main course. Claire spoke first, full of careful pride, then Charles, standing a little too stiffly, thanked everyone for supporting Simon's future. He glanced at me once but didn't name me. And then Simon stood. He was nervous, but not shy. He thanked his teachers, his parents, his school counselor. And then, looking straight at me, he said, "And to the person who first taught me how to hold a pencil properly and how to finish what I started, even when things got hard." He paused. "My grandmother, Martha Fletcher." There was a silence in the room, brief but unmistakable. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I simply looked at him. Because for the first time in years, someone saw me. After the applause, Simon returned to the table. He didn't sit near his parents. He came to ours. "Can I sit here for a bit?" he asked. "Of course," I said. He looked down at his plate, then back at me. "I'm sorry I haven't called." I touched his hand lightly. "You just did." We sat there, eating dessert, while across the room, Charles watched. Claire's mouth was tight with questions she didn't ask. Let them ask. Let them wonder. Because I was done explaining. And Simon? He had found his way back. That was enough. We didn't speak much after dessert. Simon sat beside me, finishing his cake slowly, like he didn't want to go back to their table. Joanna chatted with him about school, careful not to push. She had that instinct, the quiet ability to read a room, to step softly in other people's grief. At some point, I felt Charles watching us, not with anger, with uncertainty. He didn't come over. Neither did Claire. Let them sit with it, I thought. Let them sit with the shape of their own absence. When the evening ended, people filtered out with hugs and handshakes, the way they always do at these things. But Simon stayed beside me. Outside, under the soft glow of the club's lanterns, he hugged me again. Not stiffly. Not for show. "I mean it," he said. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come for them," I said. "I know." He glanced toward the lot where Charles was standing by the car, arms folded, waiting. "I don't know how to be different from them," Simon admitted. "You don't have to be different," I said. "You just have to decide who you're going to be. Every time you're given a choice." He nodded. Then, "Can I call you tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. "You can." Joanna and I watched him walk away, shoulders slightly hunched, hands in his pockets. A boy again, just for a moment. In the car, neither of us spoke until we were almost back in my neighborhood. Joanna turned to me. "That was brave." "It wasn't," I said. "It was overdue." She didn't argue. When we got home, I didn't unpack. I didn't sit. I walked straight to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I'd left the letters. The ones I wrote after Charles came to the house. The ones I hadn't mailed. They were still there. I read them again, line by line. The one for Simon, I kept. The one for Claire, I tore in half. Not out of anger. Just clarity. There was no bridge to cross. Nothing to salvage. The one for Charles, I still hadn't written. Until now. I sat at the table, took out a pen, and began. "Charles, you've asked for explanations, for context, for a map through all this. I don't have one. What I have is this. I gave and gave and gave, And not once did you ask if I had anything left. Not once did you ask what it cost me. You didn't see me, Charles. You saw what I could do for you. And when that changed, when I finally asked for space, for dignity, for a simple thank you, you called it cruelty. But here's the truth. Saying no to you is the kindest thing I've done for myself in years. It's not too late. But the road back doesn't go through my wallet. It goes through your heart. If you ever find it, you know where to reach me. Martha. I didn't sign it, Mom. That wasn't a title anymore. It was a role. And he'd retired me from it a long time ago. I folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. On Sunday morning, I mailed it. No tracking, no registered mail, just a plain white envelope with his name. Then I went to church, not for the sermon, not even for the music, but because I wanted to sit among people who still believed in second chances, who still made casseroles for neighbors, who still asked, "How are you?" and meant it. Mrs. Heller was there, and old Mr. Dunn. And 2 pews down, the Harris girl, the one who'd lost her husband in June. We nodded to each other the way widows do. No pity, no intrusion, just recognition. Afterward, they invited me to coffee in the church basement. I said yes. I stayed for an hour. They asked about George, about the shop I used to run. No one asked about Charles. It was a kindness I didn't know I needed. When I came home, the house didn't feel so quiet. It felt like mine. The suitcase was still packed. I unpacked it. Not because I was staying, because I no longer needed to leave to feel free. The next few days passed without noise. No phone calls, no knocks. Just the wind rustling the maple trees behind the house, the occasional creak of the porch boards when the mailman stepped up, the steady rhythm of my own routine. Coffee at 7. Walk to the market at 10. A book before bed. I kept expecting a ripple, a pushback, but none came. It was as if, having realized the well had run dry, they'd simply wandered off to look for another. And then, Friday afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was familiar, though shakier than I remembered. I opened it slowly. Grandma, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Mom and Dad aren't talking much about what happened, but I know you were there for me last weekend. And I know you didn't have to be. I'm sorry for not being around, for forgetting you were more than just Grandma who bakes. I remember things now. You showing me how to draw trees, telling me that sometimes love is quiet but still true. I'm not sure where I stand with them, but I know I want to know you, if you'll let me. Simon. I folded the letter with careful hands and set it on the table. I didn't cry. I felt something deeper, something like breath returning after a long dive. That evening, I baked a pie. Not for an event, not for guests, just for the comfort of scent, of cinnamon and apple and heat filling the corners of the house. I wrapped a slice in foil, added a note for when the world feels loud, and mailed it the next morning. Not a grand gesture, just a thread, a bridge. A few days later, another knock. Not Charles. Claire. She stood on the porch like someone forced there by obligation. Her coat was too fine for the weather. Her eyes scanned the hedges before they landed on me. I thought we should talk, she said. I didn't move to invite her in. She adjusted her purse strap. Charles isn't handling this well. He's lost sleep. He's distracted. He's not himself. And what does that have to do with me? I asked, quiet but firm. She blinked. You're his mother. I was his enabler, I corrected. Now I'm not. Claire stiffened. We all make mistakes. You made a pattern. Silence stretched between us. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. I came because I thought you'd want to find a way back. I looked at her. This woman I'd once tried so hard to befriend. The one I'd offered jewelry, recipes, rides to appointments. The one who never once asked what I needed. I already found it, I said. Back to myself. Her mouth opened, then shut. Finally. Well, I tried. Yes, I said. You tried, when it started affecting you. She left without another word. I closed the door, slowly. That night, I lit a candle in the kitchen window, not for anyone to see, just for me. A small flame in the dark. Something still burning after everything, and in the morning, the house didn't feel cold. It felt earned. The first snowfall came earlier than usual. I watched it from the armchair by the front window, wrapped in a thick shawl George once brought back from a trip to Asheville. The flakes fell slow and clean, covering the street in silence. It was the kind of snow that made the world seem kinder than it was. I didn't have anywhere to be. No one waiting on a casserole. No errands for other people's lives. Just the steady rhythm of my own breathing, the kettle starting to hum behind me, and the peace of being unnecessary to anyone but myself. I sipped my tea and opened Simon's letter again. I'd already read it 3 times. There was a sentence near the bottom I hadn't paid enough attention to before. I remember when you told me the truth isn't something you shout. It's something you live. I had told him that. He was 8, I think, and crying because a boy at school called him soft. I sat him on the porch swing, wrapped his little fists in mine, and said those words like I believed them. And now, years later, he'd remembered. Not the casseroles, not the birthday gifts, not the money, but the porch, the words, me. That was the kind of inheritance I wanted to leave behind. Not real estate, not jewelry, not carefully drafted wills and frozen dinners with a name tag. Truth, lived, not shouted. The phone rang just after noon. I answered on the second ring, not rushed. Grandma? Simon. Yes? I'm outside. I looked through the window, and there he was, standing in a coat too thin for the weather, holding a paper bag, snow dusting his shoulders. I opened the door. You didn't call first, I said. I know, he said. I didn't want to give you time to say no. I smiled. Smart. He stepped in, stomping the snow from his boots. I handed him a towel and he wiped his hair. His cheeks were red from the cold, but his eyes were steady. I brought something, he said, holding up the bag. Inside, a jar of honey, a loaf of bread, and a small, lopsided candle. I made it, he said, nodding at the candle. School project. Smells like cedar and orange. I lifted it to my nose and breathed in. It smelled like December. And memory. We sat in the kitchen. I toasted the bread. We didn't talk much while we ate. He watched me like someone trying to read a book slowly, afraid of missing something. Afterward, we moved back to the living room. I lit his candle and set it on the coffee table. You don't have to explain anything, he said suddenly. Not about Dad, or money, or any of it. I wasn't going to, I said gently. I just wanted to be here, he said. With you. I nodded. That's all I ever wanted from any of you. He looked down at his hands, then up again. I used to think you were just kind, but now I know you were strong. You still are. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. We sat in silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, while the snow thickened outside and the candle's flame burned low but steady. That evening, when he left, he hugged me again. Not like a boy. Like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. I watched him walk back through the snow, his footprints sharp in the white. I didn't feel proud. I felt seen. In the weeks that followed, Simon began calling every Sunday. Not long conversations, just enough. A few updates, a question or two. Laughter sometimes. Silence, sometimes too, the good kind. The kind that sits between people who know they don't have to fill space to be welcome in it. Once he asked if I remembered the stories I used to tell him about the bluebird that nested in our mailbox when he was little. I told him of course I remembered. How it laid 3 eggs. How we checked on them every day. How I made him promise not to touch the nest. He said he'd written a poem about it in English class. I didn't ask to read it. I didn't need to. That Sunday, after we hung up, I found myself at the mailbox again, brushing off the frost. No nest this time. Just memory. Claire called too, once, not to apologize, to inform. "There's been a shift in Charles's job," she said flatly. "He may be out by next quarter." I listened, waited. She paused, then softly. "He's not doing well." "What does that mean?" I asked. "He doesn't sleep. He walks around the house at night. He says your letter won't leave his head." I said nothing. "I'm not asking for anything," she added. "I just thought you should know." It was the most human thing she'd said in years. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. She hung up. A week later, a letter came from Charles. Not typed, not long, just 6 lines. "Mom, you were right. I didn't see you. I saw what you gave me, and I assumed you'd always be there to give. I don't know how to fix that, but I want to. If you ever feel like it, call me. Love, Charles." I didn't cry. I put the letter in the drawer beside George's. Some things need time. Others just need to be left where they are, as evidence that clarity, when it comes, is often too late for restoration, but just in time for reckoning. That Sunday, Joanna came over. We made soup together, just like old times. She peeled carrots while I sliced leeks. We moved around the kitchen like women who understood what it meant to be useful, but not used. "I saw your name on the donors list at the women's shelter," she said. "I didn't put it there." "Well, it's there," I shrugged. "Let them wonder," she smiled. "You're changing things even now." "I'm setting things right," I said. For myself. Later, we ate in silence, the kind you earn. The kind that comes after everything's been said. As she left, she kissed my cheek. "You seem lighter," she said. "I'm no longer carrying what was never mine to hold," I said. After she was gone, I turned off the lights, stood in the middle of the house, and listened. No voices, no demands, just my breath, just the quiet. And it felt like home. The new year came without ceremony, no party, no champagne, just me, sitting in my armchair with a cup of tea, watching the second hand on the wall clock push the night into morning. When the hour changed, I didn't say a word. I just exhaled. And that was enough. On the first Monday of January, I walked to the bank. Not because anything was wrong, because I wanted to see it. My balance, my name, the unbroken trail of my own decisions. Terrence greeted me like an old friend. He didn't ask why I was there, just smiled and said, "We still have those estate papers on file, if you'd like to review anything." "I'm not changing anything," I said. "I just wanted to remind myself it was real." He understood. Good people don't always come in family shapes. Afterward, I stopped by the post office. I'd ordered a small brass nameplate for the front gate. Not a family name, not a welcome message. Just Martha Fletcher, resident. I screwed it in myself that afternoon, hands steady despite the cold. When I finished, I stood back and read it aloud once. Not for the neighbors. For me. The next day, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photograph of Simon standing by the campus library, bundled in a wool coat, holding a sign that said, "First in the family, but not the last." There was a sticky note folded inside. "Your voice is in every step I take." I pinned it to the corkboard in the kitchen, next to old recipes and shopping lists. That weekend, I baked bread for the church drive. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Giving, it turns out, still lives in me. But now it has borders. People have begun to notice. Mrs. Heller asked if I'd consider leading the community book group again. I told her I'd think about it. Mr. Dunn brought by a box of firewood and said nothing, just set it by the porch. Even Claire sent a card. Not a full apology, just a line in careful script. We all could have done better. I see that now. I didn't reply. Some things are better left acknowledged but unanswered. One evening, near dusk, I sat on the porch with a quilt over my knees and a cup of coffee cooling in my hand. The neighborhood children were playing down the street, bundled in puffy jackets, shouting nonsense at each other in a language only the young seemed to know. And I thought, not about what had been taken from me, but about what I'd reclaimed. Not revenge, not even reconciliation, just space, the right to choose, the right to rest, the right to stop being useful and still be seen. George would have liked this version of me, not just for her strength, but for her peace. When the porch light flicked on, I didn't move. I sat a while longer, letting the quiet settle around me like a second shawl. There would always be echoes of dinners unspoken, of birthdays forgotten, of favors repaid with silence, but they no longer hurt. They just existed, like old furniture in the corner, useful once but no longer needed. I was no longer waiting to be invited in. I had built my own house inside myself, and it would stand. They say most women my age become invisible. I used to believe that. Then I stopped showing up the way they expected me to, and suddenly they all started looking. The pharmacist asked if I needed help reaching something. The young woman at the bakery called me ma'am and offered a discount. Even the man from the utility company, who never once looked me in the eye during all the years I paid Charles's overdue bills, paused and asked if I was doing okay these days. I said yes, and I meant it. This wasn't the life I imagined I'd have in my 70s. I'd pictured holidays filled with loud laughter and messy tables, grandchildren asleep on couches, someone calling out from the kitchen, "Mom, where's the cinnamon?" Instead, I have silence. A small house with worn floors. A single voice, mine, moving through it without hesitation. And it is enough. Some mornings, I walk through the neighborhood and notice how little has changed. The Gransons still keep their lawn too neat. The Martinez kids still ride their bikes too fast around the corner. The same tree near the bus stop still leans to the left, like it's tired of pretending it's growing straight. But I've changed. I no longer shrink in conversations. I no longer explain my choices as if I've committed a crime. I no longer ask myself if I was too harsh, or too cold, or too late. I was right on time. A few days ago, I received a voicemail from Charles. His voice was softer, slower. "Hi, Mom. I don't know if you'll listen to this, but I wanted to say I reread your letter, twice, and I think I'm beginning to understand. You don't have to call me back. I just wanted you to know I'm listening now." I didn't delete it. I didn't return the call. Some doors remain closed, not out of anger, but out of understanding. Some love is better from a distance. Simon visits once a month now. He doesn't stay long. We drink tea, talk about books, sometimes just sit quietly and eat what I've baked. He brings news of school, of his plans. He asks questions, not just about the past, but about me, who I was, who I am. Once he asked if I ever regretted anything. I told him no. Regret requires believing you had the power to choose differently when you didn't even know a choice existed. But I know better now. These days, I write in a small notebook I keep by the bed. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I write what I notice, what I remember, what I refuse to forget. Yesterday's entry. Freedom doesn't come when they stop taking. It comes when you stop giving what was never yours to give. That night, I slept well. Dreamless. Still. If you're reading this and you've ever felt like you disappeared the day they stopped needing you, don't believe it. You were never invisible. You were just looking at the wrong eyes. Start with your own. And if this story spoke to something in you, share it. Not for me. For every woman who was told she should be grateful for the silence.